In this video, I'm going to be giving you your feedback on the week 7 chapter questions about the so-called fall of the Roman Empire. The first question was who or what was responsible for the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Notice I say Western because the Eastern Empire continued in the form of the Byzantine Empire, which is why the term fall of the Roman Empire is a little misleading. Well, the traditional explanation is barbarian invasion, although it's rather more complicated than that. The barbarian peoples did invade the empire, and the western half of it broke up into a number of barbarian-ruled kingdoms. But the barbarians were also there partly at the invitation of Romans. The Roman emperors often used them as their military and invited them inside the borders of the empire in order to defend those frontiers. We should really look to more long-term and systemic problems, such as a declining population leading to a decline in the economy, fewer people who they're able to tax and able to recruit into their military, and a rising tax revenue as fewer people had to sustain the expense of the state and the military. And this in some ways explains why the Romans turned towards using barbarian warriors, because they were less able to maintain their own military. And then there's the East-West divide. This helped make the empire more governable by dividing it into an eastern and a western half. But also, it stripped the western, poorer half of the wealthier provinces in the east that would have helped it sustain itself, and also meant that the two emperors did not always collaborate and did not put up a united front in defending the empire. The second question was, what role did the church play in Europe in this period? In many ways, the church was a force for continuity of the Roman way of life. For example, the Latin language continued as the language of the church. The structure of the church reflected the structure of the old Roman Empire. In the western half, where the empire had disappeared, the Pope in Rome gave the kind of leadership that the emperor in Rome had done in the past. At a local level, the bishops also provided leadership and authority. The families from whom the bishops were drawn tended to be the same old Roman families which had provided the consuls, the senators, etc., the Roman ruling elite. And it also provided a source of religious legitimacy. With the empire gone, various Germanic rulers were keen to portray themselves as defenders of the church, most notably Clovis. In Italy, Spain, and North Africa, the Germanic rulers shared a different kind of Christianity. They were a different form called an Arian form, which meant relations with the Catholic population were a little strained. But in what today's France, the kingdom of the Franks, their king Clovis converted to, in the eyes of the church, the right kind of Christianity and is presented as a Christian king. The last question, how successful was Justinian's attempt to restore the Roman Empire? In some ways it was. The reconquests brought Italy, Africa, and parts of Spain back into the empire and stabilized the vulnerable eastern frontier with Persia. He codified the law, and the Roman law, which was very influential throughout the next millennium and a half, was really based on his codification of that law and his rebuilding scheme. For example, Hagia Sophia, his great cathedral in Constantinople, was still being used as a mosque over 1,000 years later. But on the negative side, his conquests were often temporary. Much of Italy was lost within a few years of his death to a people called the Lombards, a new invading Germanic people. The eastern provinces were lost in a spectacular fashion about a half century after Justinian's death, when the Arabs invaded and seized Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, and later on the whole of North Africa. And also, the cost of reconquest was huge. The wars to reconquer Italy absolutely devastated the region, accompanied by a devastating plague. It's been argued that Justinian ironically put an end to Roman ways of life in Italy by essentially destroying it in order to reconquer it.